Welcome in to another episode of the Saturday Report. I'm your host, Justin Andes, and we got a great and exciting show here for you today. We're talking Ole Miss 2026. Are they going to improve off of what they did last year, or are they going to regress under Pete Golding? We're going to talk top 5 games heading into this college football season, and finally we're going to wrap up with some comments and some thoughts on Dabo Swinney and Clemson. But before we get into any of that, if you love college football, if you believe like me that college football is the greatest sport on the planet, please do me a favor, like and subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe and rate it on podcast if you're listening. This is a brand new show. The Saturday Report is only 4 episodes old. So any engagement helps at this point, and I really appreciate it. Top 5 games heading into the college football season. These are games that you are circling on your calendar because you know that they are either going to be a big storyline game or a big name brand game. Those are the two things that we're looking at here. Big storylines around coaches, around programs, around movement, and then obviously you're going to just have big name games with big name brands that you're going to want to watch. So, where are we starting out? At number 5, I've got Oregon heading to USC in week 4. This is USC's first test of the year, and it's got to be against Oregon. I know Lincoln Riley has to be excited about that. This is going to be the 5th game that USC plays. They do play a week 0 game, so they're going to have some time under their belt as a team. However, they're not going to really have any teams that they're playing with a significant pulse that's going to show you who they really are. Oregon, on the other hand, they got a couple of games against teams that could have a pulse in Boise State and Oklahoma State, so they may have a little bit more quality time under the bar, but it all comes to a head in week 4 here. If USC loses a close game, or if they win, I'm not worried or concerned at all. I think they can go on to have a great year and push for a potential playoff spot, especially if they can beat Oregon. But if they lose significantly by 3 scores, by 20, 30 points, that's where I don't know if I throw in the towel yet, but I get really worried. I think at that point, if that happens, you're going to hear a lot of chatter around USC. They're going to start looking at different coaches and different options, and it might be the last you've heard of Lincoln Riley. So this is a statement. This is a prove-it game for Lincoln Riley. Does he step up to the task, or do they crumble under pressure? We'll find out in week 4. At number 4, I've got Ohio State going to Indiana in week 7. Memorial Stadium is just going to be electric, I think is probably the best word. Memorial Stadium is going to be electric this week. I don't care if it's big noon kickoff or a night game. I don't think they're concerned about that either. I think they are ready for a massive home game against Ohio State. Finally, in the era where they care about football. So I'm so excited to see what the environment's going to look like. This will be both teams' 7th game that they're playing in a row in week 7. So nobody gets the benefit of a bye week in recent weeks. Ohio State will be more battle-tested at this point. They're going to be playing at Texas and at Iowa before this game occurs, so you'll see what Ohio State is about. Indiana, not so much. Their biggest game before this is going to be at Nebraska, and it's the week before. And forgive me, but at Texas and at Iowa are going to be tougher games than at Nebraska this year. So you're going to know who Ohio State is. We might still have question marks about Indiana, whether or not they beat everybody by 30. Last year, you could argue that these were the 2 best teams in the entire country. This was at least Indiana's toughest game of the season, last year's Big Ten championship game. So Ohio State and Indiana coming together, clashing in the middle of the season is awesome. Maybe an early look or an early peek into the Big Ten championship, and even then, maybe an even earlier peek into a playoff game. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm very excited for that to show up. In the number 3 spot, we got Texas and Oklahoma, Red River in week 6. I actually think there's going to be some juice to this game this year because last year, not so much. Both teams are coming off of a bye, so both teams, no advantage one way or the other in that way. Both teams are going to be battle-tested with Texas playing Ohio State and at Tennessee prior to this game, Oklahoma playing at Michigan and at Georgia prior to this game. So we're going to know who both teams are walking into this game. Both teams have the firepower. Both teams have the staff. both coaching staff and the players on staff. Really, it's just going to come down to who's ready to play ball more that day, who's better prepared, who's got a better scheme, and who is more ready to go out there and win the football game. I think it's going to come down to whoever the toughest is. Obviously, this is a trenches sport, and so whoever's going to be toughest and make a push in the trenches, that's going to be the team that I think is going to have the edge to win here. But I'm anticipating a much more competitive game this season than we got last season, with Texas kind of running through Oklahoma fairly easily. So that's going to be one that we're looking towards. The Cotton Bowl is always a great venue for this. It's always an amazing rivalry game. The fact that it's the middle of the year, I actually think is kind of perfect for it. So always looking forward to Red River. This year even more so, because I do think that the programs are on not level footing, but it's going to be a much more fun and exciting and enjoyable game. Number 2, we're looking forward to Miami and Notre Dame in Week 10. Miami travels to South Bend late in the year. We know South Bend's going to be electric here, mainly because it's the only game at Notre Dame. Dare I say, it's the only game at Notre Dame that's going to really matter a ton this year. Obviously, we're reigniting an old rivalry, Catholics versus convicts. You can go watch the 30 for 30 to learn more of the backstory there. But really what I'm looking forward to in this is not just the logos. It's not just the brands on the field. It's the fact that I think this might be a must-win game for Notre Dame. Look at the entire rest of the schedule for Notre Dame, and you'll find that it may be a little bit more balanced than it was last year, maybe a slightly tougher average opponent than they would have had last year. But this is the only big-time game that they're going to have. If you lose this game to Miami and you're Notre Dame, who else do you have on your schedule to hang your hat on? BYU, Navy, or SMU are the only 3 that if you go out there and you play your game and you crush them, maybe you say, yeah, we beat SMU by 30, we lost to Miami by 7, we still earned our spot into the playoffs. And I don't know how you keep an 11-1 Notre Dame out of the playoffs, but if you can't get past Miami here, you're not going to have another, I won't say quality, you're not going to have another amazing win on your schedule. And so I think this is as close to a must-win game for Notre Dame as you're going to get. I think they're going to be up for it. They're going to be really hyped for it, and it'll be an exciting one. And finally, in the number 1 slot, how could you not pick LSU going to Ole Miss in Week 3? With everything that's happened this offseason, with Lane Kiffin going to LSU, Pete Golding stepping in, all the questions at each presser that's been asked to Lane Kiffin, to Pete Golding, to Trinidad Chambliss, who was talking about that recently in the Manning Passing Academy. How could you not pick this game? I think it's going to be fun. Both teams will walk in slightly battle-tested. Ole Miss is playing Louisville in Week 1. LSU's playing Clemson in Week 1. We'll kind of know who they are going into that. Lane Kiffin's going to need a force field around him to walk out of that at 100%, or out of the stadium at 100% health, I believe. And really, it's going to be the start of a new chapter of what I think is going to be a great rivalry in the sport. The past few years, LSU and Ole Miss has already been a really fun game to watch. A lot of back and forth. It seems the home team kind of gets the victories a lot here. This game's going to be in Oxford, so we'll see how that comes into things, or how that fares into things. But it's just going to be a really fun environment and a fun time, and I think it's going to be the start of a really fun rivalry moving forward. This is not the last time this is going to be a game you're looking forward to here soon. And that wraps up my top 5 games heading into this season. Where did I miss? What games would you add in and replace? I would love to know that. Before we head into our next segment, leave a comment below. Speaking of Ole Miss, what's the likelihood that Ole Miss improves in the 2026 college football season? We all know what happened with Ole Miss over the offseason, and if you don't, I'll catch you up super quickly. Lane Kiffin got Ole Miss to a point where they were winning 10 games a year. They make a playoff. The LSU position opens. They want Kiffin. Ole Miss wants answers to Kiffin of whether he's staying or not. He says, no, I'm not. They say, okay, get out the door. Pete Golding steps in as interim. wins a few games in the playoffs for them. Kiffin's now at LSU, and it's now the Pete Golding era. Pete Golding has officially had a full offseason to be able to get his team in, to get his coordinators in, and there are pretty high hopes heading into this season. A lot of Ole Miss fans do, at least from the sentiment online, believe that Pete Golding has them in a better position to win than Lane Kiffin did before, that they would much rather have Pete Golding as a head coach than Lane Kiffin. How realistic is that versus how much of it is just people being hurt about what happened? I'm not here to speculate on that. But what we're here to do today is figure out, is Ole Miss in a better spot to win this year than they were last year? Last year, just to catch you up, they went 11-1 in the regular season. They made a college football playoff semifinal, so only 2 losses on the season in total. Trinidad Chambliss played like a madman out of his mind to end the season last year. How have things changed organizationally at Ole Miss? Number one, we got a new offensive coordinator. When Lane Kiffin left, Charlie Weiss Jr. went with him down to LSU. So the new offensive coordinator is John David Baker. He was previously a co-offensive coordinator at Ole Miss before a stint at ECU. Now, what's got to have Ole Miss fans excited about this guy coming back is at ECU in 2023, before Baker was there, ECU was 127th in scoring offense. Baker gets there, they immediately shoot up almost 100 spots to 34th. In 2024, and last year another 10 spots to 24th in 2025 in all of FBS. So the guy can come in and he can make a high-powered offense and an offense that will score consistently. We also have a new defensive coordinator who was promoted, and Brian Brown promoted from coaching DBs, and I think he was the co-DC there previously. We got Joe Judge staying. Didn't go to LSU with Kiffin and with Weiss. He was the quarterback's coach, so he's going to stay with Trinidad Chambliss, helping him to grow and develop, and probably helping to bridge a little bit of the gap between Chambliss coaching and John David Baker, who had not had the chance to coach him before. So that dynamic, I think, can work out well. A lot of this is going to come down to who you actually have on the field. The guys that you have on staff are going to be very helpful in developing the players that you have, but you got to have the guys on the field to compete as well as you did last year. So, who do you have returning, first of all? We got Trinidad Chambliss, alien, last year. Did an awesome job. We got Kawan Lacey returning from last year's team, was one of the top rushers in the country, one of the best running backs in the country. It was huge to keep him around in the offseason. He's coming back, so the 1-2 punch with Chambliss and Lacey is super important. We got Suntarine Perkins coming back, who is just electric last year on defense, flies around the field, making tackles everywhere. Super fun to watch. I'm excited to see what he does this year. And then the last guy that's returning that may be a little bit more unsung that I wanted to mention was Luke Haas. He's coming off of an injury, did not have a huge breakout year last year because he was injured so early in the year, but at Arkansas previously, he was a pretty consistent guy and a guy that found a way to get open, usually caught the ball whenever it was thrown his way, and can be a really good weapon for Trinidad Chambliss. He's also super tough to tackle. Who did they lose outside of the players that they kept? Just a few. Number one, a ton at receiver. I think their top 3 or 4 receivers left, whether it be graduating the draft or leaving for the transfer portal. They lost a lot at O-line. Again, I think it was 4 or 5 O-linemen that they lost that they need to figure out how to replace. They lost TJ Daughtery, Prince Wilumon Mielen, and Devin Harper, all transferring to LSU. All 3 of those guys I think were going to be key pieces into this coming year. Especially Prince Wilumon Mielen. You can't find a guy like him rushing off the edge everywhere. So he's going to be a tough one to fill the gap on. And then I already mentioned receivers, but Caden Lee at receiver was a big one to lose. Who do we intake from the transfer portal and from recruiting? Mainly we're going to focus on the portal because we're looking at this year and who's going to make an impact this year. Who did they take in from the transfer portal in order to fill those gaps? We got Luke Farrelly. We don't have to get into the story on him. Anyway, he goes from Cal to Clemson to Ole Miss. He comes in. We got Jonte Cook out wide. Carius Kern comes in from LSU. Frank Wilson helped, I'm sure, secure that to happen to try to fill in some gaps on the O-line. Jaheim Otis comes in from Colorado, and we got Tony Mitchell coming in to fill that safety role. So a lot of new players coming in and not a lot of new blood, but also a lot of things that can meld and mesh pretty easily. As long as that O-line figures it out, I like their chances because Trinidad Chambliss and Kawan Lacey are going to be awesome. That's just how it is. But if the O-line does not gel and they can't find guys to fill all 5 spots and be consistent there and have a consistent run game and be able to protect Trinidad Chambliss, it's going to be a really tough time for everybody involved. Let alone even if they can block. Let's say the O-line gets it all figured out, but they don't backfill and they don't get all the receivers that they need to go and have a breakout year, maybe have a star emerge from those. That's going to make for a tough year as well. Who's Chambliss going to throw it to if nobody can get open? So a lot of question marks in the air, and all those question marks are leading me down the path to say I do not believe Ole Miss is going to improve from last year. It's so hard to improve from last year. They'd have to go undefeated because they were 11-1 in the regular season last year. And to have a first-year head coach, to have a first-year Power 5 offensive coordinator, to have a first-year Power 5 or Power 4 offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, all of that coming together with a whole bunch of new players and the lines of scrimmage not being completely established, I don't believe there's any way that they get to the end of the season even matching what they did last year at 11-1. You got to think they're scheduled. They have LSU at home in week 3. Then the week after that, a sneaky game at Florida, coming off a big emotional game at LSU to go in and find a hungry team in the swamp. That's going to be a tough one to win. They got to play at Texas. They got to play Georgia at home, and they have to play Oklahoma. I don't see a world where less than one of those games is a loss, and I think it's more likely that 2 to 4 of those games are losses than that 1 or 0 is a loss. So I think Ole Miss is going to regress this year under Pete Golding. It does not mean that the Pete Golding era is a wash or a failure. All it means is that there is more building to do. Pete Golding, I think, is a good guy to be able to do it. I think he's a great coach. He can build a program. He's learned how to do it under Lane Kiffin. He's just got to start from scratch. He's got to start somewhere. So give him some time, and you'll be able to find some good outcomes with him. But for this year, specifically, Ole Miss, I would sell on them compared to how well they played last year. Remember, whether you're an Ole Miss fan or not, like and subscribe. Again, it helps us out a ton, and we really, really enjoy being able to do these shows for you. And the last final segment that we want to get into is Dabo Swinney and Clemson. The big question is, and the question that I had is Dabo right where he wants to be right now? Obviously, I think he'd like to have a better, I think he'd like to have a better pool of players. I think recruiting has been a slight challenge for them. Maintaining their roster has been pretty good. They're not getting the guys in from the transfer portal because Dabo's just not portaling very heavily. But what this has done is over the last 3 years or so, Clemson has seemingly regressed on a roster level. They don't have the quarterbacks that they used to or the big names that they used to, the players that are just going to light you up every single Saturday. They still got a couple of those, but they just don't have the depth of names that they had previously or the roster, a 22-man roster of these guys that are just striking fear into you. Then again, Clemson didn't have that in 2012, 2013, 2014 either. Sure, they were starting to build it. But one thing Dabo Swinney utilized in those years, and especially in that 2016 and 2018 year where they had won the national championship, is he utilized the underdog story. If Dabo Swinney is nothing else, he is an amazing salesman. He can sell recruits, and he can sell his team, and he can sell the local media. And he did an amazing job of selling his team back in 2016 and 2018 that they're underdogs and they're not supposed to win anything, so they just need to go out, they need to fight, they need to lay it all out because they are better than everybody thinks that they are. Can Dabo do that again this year with a brand new team where they are clearly the underdog? clearly the underdog. They're not. I don't know where they're at in the odds to win the ACC, but I don't think they're even top 3 right now. Maybe top 5. So can Dabo utilize that for this Clemson football team? If he can, and he can do it well, Clemson could end up this season a lot better off than people thought, even potentially pushing for a playoff spot. And if they do that, that's a win for Dabo and for Clemson, because everybody's already writing them off. Even Dabo, he's already quote-unquote writing them off and saying he's got a team full of nobodies. But what that means for him, I think, is that he's got Clemson right where he wants them, because he can use this to light a fire and to sell to all their players that they need to work hard, that they need to make something of themselves, and that they need to go out and play hungry and play fiery, and that's where Dabo wants to be. Now, here's what Dabo doesn't have. He doesn't have Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence walking out there at quarterback. So even if he is the underdog, he's really the underdog because he doesn't have a superstar going out there to lead an offense and to go win football games for him. But he's got a great story and a great story to sell, and I think he's going to use that. They have zero expectation this year. They fired Garrett Riley last year because everything at the offensive level was just going horribly. They bring back Chad Morrison, who was an offensive coordinator there in the early 2010s. We'll see how that offense has evolved over time and if it's going to still be viable for a Clemson team in 2026. If it is, that could be interesting, and it could be a way to get them a few more wins. The only thing I'm thinking of is Christopher Vizina. There's no way that he's Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence, right? If he emerges out of nowhere and does that, all props to Dabo, all props to Clemson. I don't know if I could ever say another bad thing about them again if they bring him up out of seemingly nothing. But it's definitely a different dynamic than we saw back in 2016 and 2018. Nonetheless, Dabo has a history of using being the underdog to his advantage, and I think that he can do it here, potentially do it really successfully, and push Clemson to a higher level than they were playing previously, because last year when they were top 5 preseason and they lose, and then they lose again. Who did they lose to last year? I wrote it down. LSU, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, Duke, and then Penn State in the Pinstripe Bowl. All in, they finished the year 7-6. So I missed one in there. They finished the year 7-6 when they were ranked preseason top 5. It's an abject failure. Maybe he just couldn't push those guys to make themselves better because they already thought they were hot stuff walking in to the locker room, walking into fall camp, walking into the game on Saturdays, and they just didn't develop in the way that they had to. That could totally be what happened. And he could just love a team that's like this, that needs to be hungry, that needs to figure things out. All that to say, we're going to find out pretty dang quickly when Clemson walks into Death Valley. I don't want to say the real Death Valley, but they walk into Death Valley on September 5th in the evening. And we'll see what happens then. And that's our show for you today. Thank you very much for watching and for listening. Again, remember to like, subscribe. If you're listening on podcasts, Spotify or Apple Music, rate, review, and subscribe there. We greatly appreciate it, and we will catch you in the next episode.